Gives it back to Rush. Deep shot. Get it! What a perfect ending to a historic day. Gilbert for the win. Doncic pulls up. Three-pointer. Bang! Bang! It's good. Doncic wins.
Welcome back to the Respectfully Uncut podcast, NCAA Tournament edition. As we are breaking down each region of the NCAA Tournament, we are on to the final region, the West region, and we will go ahead and start at the top with the first matchup between the number 1 seed Kansas Jayhawks and the number 16 seed Howard University. The Jayhawks come into the tournament as the third overall number 1 seed. For much of the conclusion to the season, a lot of people thought they would be the number 1 overall seed, but faltering down the line, losing to Texas big the last game of the regular season, and then losing in the conference title game to the Longhorns dropped them to the third of the 1 seeds. Nonetheless, they come in 27-7, 13-5, winners of the Big 12 regular season. They're top 10 in both the net and KenPom rankings. Looking at Howard, the Bison had a great season in their own right, 22-12, 11-3 in their conference, finished first in the MEAC, and sit in the net ranking at 214 and the KenPom at 216. There's a number of things to talk about with the Jayhawks. This matchup is going to be won by Kansas. It's not going to be close. The line on the game is 22, and that's probably just about right. I have the Jayhawks as a 23.5 point favorite. So not going to be a close matchup, not going to be any type of UMBC upset here, but a couple important things to talk about the Jayhawks. They've had a lot of distractions going on. First off, Kevin McCullers, one of their better defensive players, if not their best defensive player, did not play in the last few games of the Big 12 tournament. He is set to play in the NCAA tournament, but you wonder his health. Is he 100%? We've not gotten much of an update from the Jayhawks on him, and he is a key factor to the Jayhawks' success, and it's not because he is some incredible All-American player. He's important because the Jayhawks really lack depth, and with McCullers out, they're forced to go to their bench where they don't have nearly as much, and they've struggled. That's what's happened down the line against Texas in the Big 12 tournament. You could see their lack of depth really reared its head in that game. Couple other things. Bill Self, obviously dealing with a health scare in the Big 12 tournament. He did not coach the entirety of that conference tournament. He is back. He will be coaching in the NCAA tournament. But you wonder, with the McCullers injury, Self being away from the program for over a week, a lot of different things that don't normally happen going on. You kind of start having some issues where now you lose the last game of the season. You've lost 2 of your last 4. Self is an outstanding coach. And when he's on the sideline, Kansas really, I would say 99% of the time has an advantage with Self as their leader. He's a great coach. Obviously, he's won 2 national titles. Jayhawks defending national champions from last year. But when you look at this Jayhawks team, in addition to the distractions, I'm really not sure what they are. You look at, obviously, Jalen Wilson, outstanding player of the year in the Big 12. He's going to give you between 17 and 22 a night. And I think he'll step up in the tournament. He's got a lot of tournament experience, obviously. A lot of these guys do. But when you look at the rest of the team, you look at a guy like Grady Dick, had a really good start to the year. Everybody was super high on him midway through the conference season, and he fell off at the end of the conference. And that tends to happen sometimes with freshmen who aren't used to the grind of an entire 35 to 40 game college season. Then you look at a guy like KJ Adams, super athlete, really tough inside, but lacking skill. And when you take a McCullough away and you're forced to go to depth, and KJ Adams is playing more minutes, his lack of shooting ability hurts the Jayhawks. And then lastly, and I think this is the biggest key to whether the Jayhawks can make a deep run, and that's DeJuan Harris. DeJuan Harris is the point guard for the Jayhawks. He is a guy who really mirrors Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Some games he goes out there, he's absolutely outstanding. He looks like one of the best point guards in the country. He can knock down the standstill 3. He's an incredible passer with great vision, takes care of the ball. And when he's playing well, the Jayhawks are almost impossible to beat. Other times you wonder, what he is doing out there. He has some performances that are just total head scratchers, and he struggles. That happened in both the games they lost to Texas, especially the Big 12 title game. He was turning the ball over left and right. He wasn't shooting the ball well. He was attacking the rim out of control. If he does not play well, the Jayhawks have no shot at making a deep run. They don't have enough elsewhere. He is relied upon too much on this team. Last year's team, obviously with Ochai Agbaji, they were able to have Harris just be a very game managing role, right? This year he's had to play more of a leader, more than just a game manager. He's got to contribute some scoring, and they need him to do some of those things and take care of the ball, get into the paint, and create for others, and he hasn't done a great job as of late. So, in my opinion, Kansas, um, obviously, I think they're a Sweet 16 team either way because the 8-9 matchup that I'm going to break down next just isn't a big threat to them. Neither of those teams are great, or are going to give the Jayhawks any kind of problems. But when you get to the Sweet 16 and you're looking at a team like a UConn, I currently have UConn beating Kansas in my bracket, and it's largely because there's too much uncertainty with the Jayhawks. Right, it's hard to repeat even when you're at full strength, let alone with all these distractions and all these issues the Jayhawks have had as of late. Moving on to the 8-9 matchup. We've got the number 8 seed Arkansas Razorbacks taking on the number 9 seed Illinois Fighting Illini, the Razorbacks out of the SEC, where they finished actually 9th in the conference, 20-13 in the regular season, had a very good non-conference season, and then struggled in conference mightily. They are actually rated significantly higher than the Illini, 21st in the net, 28th in the KenPom. Illinois comes in 20-12 on the regular season, 6th in the Big East at 11-9 in conference, and they sit at 34 in the net and 33 in the KenPom. Arkansas sitting currently at a 2-point favorite. If you like the Arkansas Razorbacks, you can get them at minus 135 on the money line. Illinois at plus 115, and the total at a modest 143.5. When you look at this game, I think I mentioned this earlier. The committee did a really good job of putting teams that are very similar and similar in level of play, not necessarily styles, in the 8-9 matchups. Really tough to predict this one, just again because these two teams have been just hit or miss. There's a lot of variance in these games. One thing might happen, but if a set of conditions happen, another thing might happen. So the way I look at this game is first of all, it's going to be an absolutely disgustingly ugly game. Both these two teams, as we look at the game breakdown, both these two teams are outside the top 300 in 3-point percentage, right? You look at Illinois, 30.9%, 331 out of 363 qualifying teams. Arkansas's 3-point shooting, not much better, 31.7%, 304th in the country out of 363 qualifying teams, right? So both teams do a very poor job shooting the three ball. The difference is Arkansas takes significantly less threes. When you look at the Illinois offense, 42% of their shots come from three-pointers. You can see that right here, right? That's 65th in the country. This is a team who is one of the worst teams in the country shooting the three ball, and yet they spend a large portion of their offense shooting threes. It doesn't make a lot of sense. When you look at Arkansas, on the other hand, not a good three-point shooting either. They're 346th in three-point attempts per field goal. So they don't take nearly as many threes. Only 28% of their shots are threes. Big difference between the two teams. So Arkansas, that tells me that Arkansas is likely, the better coached team, the more engaged. They know that the team isn't a good three-point shooting team, and they're not going to just sit there and live behind the three-point line. Illinois, on the other hand, is content to continue to fire threes. I think that's going to be the difference here. When you look at the two coaching staffs, too, I don't think either guy is anything to write home about. Obviously, I think both of them are pretty good recruiters. Brad Underwood has done some good things in the past, but I think he's really struggled in the tournament. They should have lost last year in the first round. They barely escaped as a 4 seed, and then lost in the second round. When you look at Arkansas, Musselman has had a lot of success in the tournament. I don't think Musselman is the greatest X's and O's coach, but he's a good motivator. He's a good recruiter. And talent-wise, Arkansas has more talent on their roster than Illinois. Illinois is built more by transfers from the transfer portal. They have Matthew Mayer, the former player at Baylor. They've got Terrence Shannon, played at Texas Tech for Mark Adams and for Chris Beard. When you look at Arkansas, they have more of the top recruits. Nick Smith Jr., Anthony Black, Ricky Council Jr., all those guys, Jordan Walsh, all those guys are outstanding young guys who are NBA prospects. And when you look at Illinois, it's more of guys who transferred out of other programs for various reasons. I like the Razorbacks in this one. Again, a lot of variance in these 8-9 matchups. They could go either way, but I'm going to lean with the team who I think knows what they do better, right? Arkansas knows what they do better. Illinois kind of doesn't really understand who they actually are. So give me the Razorbacks in this 8-9 matchup. Moving on to the 5-12 matchup in the West, we've got the St. Mary's Gales taking on the VCU Rams. St. Mary's comes in, finishing second in the West Coast Conference, 26-7, 14-2 in the conference. They lost the conference championship to Gonzaga. They actually won a share of the West Coast regular season title. They're 11th in both the net and the Ken Palm. The VCU Rams, on the other hand, come in 27-7. Regular season champs in the A-10, also won their conference tournament at 15-3 in the conference play. Net and Ken Palm separated by just a few, 53-58. The line on the game sits for VCU is plus 160 on the money line if you like the Rams to win the game outright, and the total an extremely low 123. When you look at this game, it's going to be absolutely a defensive battle. Both teams hang their hats on their defenses. VCU, both teams top 20 defenses in the country. VCU 17th in the country in defensive efficiency. St. Mary's top 10, sitting at 8th. But the difference, in addition to St. Mary's being the slightly better team, is St. Mary's has significantly better offensive play. They're top 40 in the country in offensive adjusted efficiency. VCU outside the top 140. And that's because VCU wants to rely on one thing, and that's forcing turnovers. They don't have a great half-court offense. What they want to rely on is getting out in transition, creating extra shots off of forcing turnovers. As you can see here, the VCU defense, 6th in the country in turnover percentage forced, 24.1%. But when you look at St. Mary's and how they're built, they do a really good job of taking care of the ball. Not only are they're 16.4% turnover percentage, which is fringe top 50, but they average just 10.7 turnovers per game. That's one of the best in the country. They don't have a single guy on their roster averaging more than 1.8 turnovers per game. And when you look at their best players, they're guards, right? Logan Johnson, number 0, Aiden Mahaney, number 20, both about 6'2", 6'3 guards, handle the ball. Both are have individual turnover rates below 14%. And both guys really just do a good job of taking care of the ball in general. And I think VCU's only shot here to beat St. Mary's is to make this a very chaotic game, get the pace going quick, right? VCU's offense plays at a pace of 106 in the country. St. Mary's, one of the slowest offenses in the country, at 359th. So VCU's going to try to speed the game up. The problem is it's just really hard to speed St. Mary's up. I also like the spot for St. Mary's. I think they would be a bigger favorite here if they hadn't gotten smashed by Gonzaga in the West Coast Conference Championship game. If I see this number get anywhere close to 3, I'm going to go ahead and have a play on St. Mary's. Definitely going to watch the game, see if VCU gets a lead early and I can get a little bit more value. But I really wouldn't mind laying the 4 on the Gales. Moving down the bracket, we now find ourselves looking at the 4-13 matchup between the UConn Huskies out of the Big East. They come in 25-8, 13-7. They are 4th in the Ken Palm, despite being 4th in their own conference, 8th in the net ranking system. Iona, the Gales, coached by Rick Pitino, come in 27-7, 1st in the MAC, and they finished 58 in the net and 74th in the Ken Palm. Interesting matchup here. UConn favored by 9. This number has come down a bit. It was closer to 11 earlier in the week. If you like the Gales to win the game outright. You can get them at plus 345 on the money line, total 143.5. When you look at this game, you have the UConn Huskies, and they truly are a legitimate national title contender. And to me, the biggest question before we get into the breakdown on whether or not UConn can make a deep run and get to a Final Four is, can Dan Hurley get out of his own way? Dan Hurley, the head coach of the Huskies, has a good basketball mind. Obviously, he comes from a basketball family. His dad, the legendary coach at St. Anthony's High School in Jersey City, but he tends to implode in big moments. And when things aren't going his way, he tends to lose his cool. And, I think that's partially why UConn has lost so many games. It happened in a big moment in one of their games this year where they were down by just 2 under a minute to go, and he picked up a double tech and got tossed, and all of a sudden the game was over. 4 free throws in the ball. So if Dan Hurley can get out of his own way here, I think UConn has the talent to make a deep, deep run. The numbers say that. The eye test says it. They've got a beast inside in Adama Sanogo. They've got some really good guard play in Tristan Newton and Jordan Hawkins. So it'd be interesting to see if the UConn Huskies can make a deep run here. First time UConn's been, really a solid contender in a long, long time, maybe since Kemba Walker. Obviously, they won with Shabazz Napier, but I don't think anybody actually considered them a real contender going into the tournament that year. When you break down this game, there's one key thing to look at that jumps off the page to me, and that is offensive rebound percentage, where the Huskies come in the number 1 offensive rebounding team in the country. They rebounded close to 40% of their missed shots. When you look at Iona's defense, they are 272nd in the country defending the offensive boards. UConn is going to have an absolute field day here on the offensive glass. Adama Sanogo is just too big inside, and I think if you take every other thing out of here, aside from the talent gap and all those things, the gap in offensive rebound percentage is massive. I don't think Iona can rebound with UConn with 6 people on the floor, let alone 5-on-5. It's just going to be too much for the Gales inside. When you look at what Iona wants to do offensively, 55% rather of their production, and it comes from 2-point shots. That's 50th most in the country. When you look at UConn, what do they do well? Defend the 2-point shot, 27th in the country in 2-point percentage defense. So I just don't really see a path here for Iona to win the game. Anything can happen in March, and it wouldn't shock me. Rick Pitino's a heck of a coach still, but he's on his way out. He's going to be the head coach at St. John's, and that'll likely be occurring right after Iona exits the tournament here. So very interesting to see how that aspect of it plays out. But I just think the UConn Huskies are too much inside. You look at, like we said, you look at the personnel here. Adama Sanogo is just a monster inside. Tristan Newton and Jordan Hawkins, really good guards, 6'5". Their size is going to bother the guards of Iona. Iona is going to try to get out and force some turnovers. Try to press you like Rick Pitino always does, try to get you out of control, but there's just too much talent on that UConn team. Moving on to the 6-11 matchup here, we've got the 6-seeded TCU Horned Frogs out of the West region taking on the winner of the play-in game between Arizona State and Nevada. That game will be played tonight in Dayton, Ohio. Nevada comes in 22-10, 12-6 in conference. They were the last team in the tournament field. Arizona State, 22-12, 11-9, 5th in the Pac-12, likely got in on their win over Arizona, which came on a 3/4 court shot at the buzzer, so they can thank their rival for that win, which likely got them into the NCAA tournament. I would lean Arizona State here tonight. I think they're the better team. I don't think Nevada is a tournament team. And you just look at how the Mountain West has performed in the past few years in the tournament, and it's just not been very good. I've already taken 3 Mountain West teams, which I'm still already regretting in this tournament. I'm not going to take a 4th to win a game. I don't even think they'll get past Arizona State, let alone past TCU. But I don't think really it matters who TCU plays in this one. I think they're just too tough, too athletic, too good defensively. They're top 20 in overall defensive efficiency. Obviously, they played in the best conference in the country, and what they do really well is they pressure you, they pressure the ball, they're physical, they force turnovers. They're top 25 in the country in turnover percentage forced. They don't shoot the ball well, and I think that's what's going to lend itself to not allowing TCU to make a deep run here. But if you look at their personnel, they do have a guy who, sometimes these teams get one player who carries them all the way to a Final Four. Mike Miles is that type of player, 6'2" junior guard. He is an outstanding point guard, shooter, player, shoots it at 35% from three, shoots it at nearly 57% from two. He attacks the rim. He's a knockdown shooter. He's a good passer. I think Mike Miles has a chance to carry TCU in this first game, and I don't think they have an answer. Arizona State or Nevada will have an answer for Mike Miles. When they get past whoever they may play in this first round, it's going to be a tough matchup with whoever they have in the second round, which is likely going to be Gonzaga. That's going to be a difficult matchup. If they're able to get past them, they unfortunately have the bad luck of drawing UCLA, which UCLA is dealing with a massive injury that has really significantly hindered their national title hopes. But I still think UCLA is an Elite Eight team. TCU has a pretty tough path to get to an Elite Eight or a Final Four here. So I like TCU to get past this first round game regardless. So give me the Horned Frogs in the first one. Not sure they're going to be able to make a deep tournament run, which is unfortunate because I think they're a team, if they got the right draw, who maybe could make some noise in this tournament. Moving along to a 3-14 matchup between the Gonzaga Bulldogs out of the West Coast Conference and the winners of the WAC Conference Tournament, the Grand Canyon Antelopes, who enter the NCAA Tournament for the second time in 2 years. The Zags come in 28-5, 14-2, actually a little under the radar this year. In years past, the Zags have been one of the top seeds in the tournament. This year, they come in just a 3 seed, and maybe this is the year the Zags are able to make a deep run. I think they maybe have caught a break with UCLA having one of their best players go down with an injury, that potentially being a Sweet 16 matchup. The Zags may be able to finally break through. But they first have to take care of the Antelopes of Grand Canyon, who come in 24-11, 11-7 in the conference. Although finishing fourth in their conference regular season, they ran through their conference tournament on their way to a WAC championship and a NCAA tournament bid. The Zags currently sit at a 15.5 point favorite. If you like Grand Canyon to win the game outright, you can get them at plus 1050. And the total sits at 156. Looking at this matchup, the question is, does Grand Canyon have any chance here to pull off this massive upset? And I think the answer is it's very unlikely. Definitely more unlikely than some of the other 3-14 matchups we've seen in this tournament field. The Zags come in the number one overall offense in the country, extremely efficient. They shoot the ball top 12 from both 3 and 2. Number 2 in overall effective field goal percentage. They take care of the ball. They're top 10 or fringe top 10 in turnover percentage. Going to be really tough to get the Zags out of what they want to do. And when you look at the Grand Canyon defense, they don't do a poor job of defending shooting, 36th actually in the country in effective field goal percentage defense, but they are one of the worst teams in the country turning you over. They are one of the worst teams in the country at allowing offensive rebounds, and they're one of the worst teams in the country at allowing teams to get to the free throw line. All things that Gonzaga does good or even better than that. When you look at the other side of the ball, this may lend itself to give you maybe an idea that Grand Canyon may have a chance to stay in this game. They at least have a path to know what to do to stay in this game, and that is shoot the 3 ball. When you look at how Grand Canyon is built, they take a ton of threes. Almost 35% of all their points come from downtown, and they are a top 25 team in shooting the 3 ball. When you look at Gonzaga's defense, which is an area they've just really struggled in this year overall, what do they do poorly? Defend the 3. 249th in the country in defending the 3-point shot. They go up 35% from the 3-point line. Grand Canyon's going to have to take and make a ton of threes to stay in this game. That's a tall task, but if there is a team who is willing to do that, it's Grand Canyon. They do have an outstanding coach in Bryce Drew, and he's done a heck of a job there at Grand Canyon, getting them to back-to-back NCAA tournaments. I have a feeling he's going to be getting a bigger job here soon. The problem with Grand Canyon as an underdog or Cinderella here is that Gonzaga handles these types of teams. Gonzaga is a team that really just is used to playing teams at this level, considering the conference they play in, considering some of the non-conference games they play. Gonzaga never tends to struggle with teams that are these Cinderella stories, right? Gonzaga tends to struggle when they step up in class. So I really don't see a path to success in reality for Grand Canyon. Theoretically, yes, if they shoot the three ball extremely well, they might be able to hang in the game for a little bit. But I think the number was right on point. I think the Zags win this one going away. And I think that they're on to bigger and better things as they think they might be able to make an actual deep tournament run here. Moving on to the 7-10 matchup, we have the Northwestern Wildcats out of the Big Ten, finishing third in the conference, kind of a surprise team picked to finish in the bottom of the Big Ten. Had a good season in conference, finished 21-11, 12-8 in conference play. They sit 41 in the net ranking and 42 in the KenPom, and they take on the third team out of the Mountain West, the Boise State Broncos. Boise State had a heck of a year, 24-9, 13-5 in the Mountain West. They come in at the net ranking of 29 and a KenPom ranking of 31. The line currently sits Northwestern at a short favorite of 1.5, total at 128. And this is another one of those matchups where you have a Mountain West team with a number of statistical and metric advantages, but they come out of the Mountain West. And I've had a lot of trouble looking at these games. I have gone with the Mountain West team in two previous matchups already, although I really believe that Missouri-Utah State game is a complete toss-up, and I think this one really is too. When you look at both teams and what they want to do, Boise State and Northwestern, both teams hang their hats on their defense. Northwestern 13th in defensive efficiency. Boise State is 14th in defensive efficiency. And what makes it really difficult to look at some of these Mountain West teams is you look at the metrics, and Boise State looks like the better team on paper, but it's hard to tell whether those numbers are just skewed because the Mountain West is just not very good. When you watch teams play in the Mountain West, the only team that really pressures the ball and pressures you is San Diego State. Then all of a sudden you get these teams going into the tournament and they see this pressure that they haven't seen all year. Except for a team that really runs that conference, and teams tend to struggle in NCAA tournament games. When you look at this game, though, because of that, I really wanted to make a case for Northwestern. I really want to take them here, and initially I did. I've been back and forth on this game a ton, as I have on all the Mountain West teams here, but I'm just leaning slightly to Boise State, and it's largely because Northwestern is so putrid on offense. You look at their numbers offensively. Outside the top 280 in three-point percentage, they shoot it at 32.1%. Outside the top 300 in two-point percentage, shooting at 46.5%. And you look at Boise State's defensive metrics. They're top 30 in defensive in guarding the three-point line, top 75 in guarding the two-point shot. Boise State, although they didn't play in a great conference, that conference does seem to be up this year, right? 4 teams in from the Mountain West, although I don't really believe Nevada is a tournament team. When you look at Northwestern offensively, right, 109th in overall offensive efficiency. Not only do they not shoot the ball well, they don't rebound offensively well, and they don't get to the free throw line all that much. The only thing that they do well offensively is they take care of the ball. When you look at Boise State's defense, one thing they don't do well, force turnovers. So you are going to see a lot of not a ton of possessions taken away by the Boise State defense. But you look at some of the guys for Northwestern. Bui is a good 6'2 guard, but he shoots it at 31% from 3, 46% from 2. Okay, Chase Adigi, 32.6% from 3. They don't have a single guy who plays in their starting lineup above 35% from 3. Their best shooter is just at 34, Robbie Barron. And Northwestern really is going to have to win this game solely with defense. You could honestly, again, some of these matchups, flip a coin. I'm going to go slightly lean towards Boise State. Marcus Shaver is a really good point guard for Boise State. He's their game manager. He takes care of the ball. Not a great shooter, but leads the team in assists and manages the team for them. And then they have a couple other guys, Tyson Degenhart and Max Rice. Max Rice is an outstanding shooting guard, shoots it at over 41% from the three-point line, super efficient. And I just think Boise State's going to have a little bit more offense. I don't think Northwestern can completely shut down Boise State's offense. And I think Boise State will do enough on the defensive end to stifle Northwestern. It's going to be a close game. It's going to come down to the very end, but I'm going to take the better offensive team in this matchup. That's been my theme in this tournament. I'm going to lean on the better offensive team. It makes me feel a little bit better that Boise is a very good defensive team. And so I'll go with the team that shoots it better. Give me the Broncos in this one. Moving on to our final game of this NCAA tournament for the 2023 round of 64. We have the number 2 seed out of the West region, UCLA. The Bruins come in 29-5, 18-2 in the conference, winning the regular season Pac-12 crown before falling in the conference championship to their rival Arizona. They sit third in both the net and KenPom rankings. They take on the Bulldogs of UNC Asheville, the 15th seed in the West region, 27-7 on the season. Winners of the Big South regular and conference championships, regular season and conference tournament championships, rather. They come in 140 in the net ranking and 146 in the KenPom. UCLA currently sits at a 17.5-point favorite. You can get UNC Asheville at plus 1150 on the money line, and the total at 134.5. I don't see this matchup being close, and it's really not all that interesting to break this down, but UCLA is an interesting team to break down. UCLA, I thought going into the conference tournament, every time I watch them, thinking they're going to find a way to have a stinker, they're going to struggle on the road, and yet every time I watch them, they tended to find ways to win games. And I was strongly considering having them go to my Final Four, maybe even be my national champion. Unfortunately for the Bruins, the number one thing to talk about here is the loss of Jalen Clark. Jalen Clark, their best defender, which is huge for a team that is the number 1 defensive team in the country, according to KenPom rankings. He was their second best rebounder and their third leading scorer. He is a massive, massive loss for the Bruins, and I think he is probably the difference in them making an actual championship run. I still think they have a shot to get to a Final Four. I'm not sure they're going to be able to get past UConn or Kansas without Jalen Clark, but I still think UCLA will have a chance to make a really deep run here. It'll be a very interesting matchup in the Sweet 16, likely against the Gonzaga Bulldogs if both teams are able to avoid the upsets before that round. When you look at UCLA, they are an outstanding defensive team, as I mentioned before. Number 1 in overall defensive efficiency. They are top 100 in 3 of the 4 factors defensively, 27th in the country in opponent effective field goal percentage, fringe top 30 in opponent 3-point percentage, top 50 in opponent 2-point percentage. They just do a very, very good job on the defensive end. When you look at UCLA, one thing I think we should talk about here is Mick Cronin, their head coach. Now, Mick Cronin has a connotation for being a very, very good coach. And I do think Mick has done an outstanding job with UCLA. I thought he did a great job at Cincinnati. The problem with Mick is that he has really not performed well in the NCAA tournament. 13 trips to the NCAA tournament as a head coach, 10 of those 13 trips, he has exited in either the first or second round. So he's failed to make the Sweet 16 in 10 of 13 trips to the NCAA tournament as a head coach. A couple different times with Cincinnati, he had teams who are ranked, who were seeded as a 2 or a top 2 seed, lost in the first 2 rounds. He's made the Sweet 16 twice, and one run to the Final Four came back when UCLA was a much lower seed. They were a surprise team. It was in the first year of his trip or of his transfer over to UCLA, and they had a guy named Johnny Juzang who kind of just went nuts. They do have some really key pieces back from that group in Tiger Campbell and Jaime Jaquez, but I just think the loss of Jalen Clark and the fact that Mick Cronin has really kind of turned this team in to the same type of team that he had at Cincinnati, who tended to lose early in the tournament. And that is a team that is really, really elite defensively, but tends to struggle on the offensive end. And I'm not saying UCLA is a bad offense, but they're 25th in offensive efficiency. You would think playing in the Pac-12, a conference where there isn't a lot of defense played, if we're being honest, you would think UCLA would be a higher ranked offensive team, but they rely a lot on mid-range jump shots, which tends to be an inefficient shot in college basketball. They rely a lot on their two guys, their two leaders in Tiger Campbell and Jaime Jaquez, and they've now lost one of their key offensive players and third leading scorer in Jalen Clark. I really, really wanted to pick the Bruins to go to a Final Four here. In the past, I've been kind of snake bitten by Mick Cronin. I had some of those Cincinnati teams going deep because I love watching teams who play really good defense and play tough basketball. And I think UCLA is going to be a difficult out. Nobody's blowing this team out. If you're going to beat UCLA, it's going to come down to the wire, just like Arizona did in the conference title game on Saturday night last week. But overall, the Bruins will get past UNC Asheville without any issue, and it'll come down to whether or not they can absorb the loss of Jalen Clark and whether or not Mick Cronin can get his team to show enough offense when they play teams like Gonzaga, who can really score the ball, when they play teams like Connecticut, who have that level of athleticism that matches UCLA. But I like the Bruins a lot to at least get to a Sweet 16, and they'll have a chance to make a good run here. I'm going to go ahead and conclude the bracket breakdown here. That will end not only the West region, but it's our final region that we've broken down. I've gone in depth over every game. I'm going to be back with another video giving you some advice on some maybe betting picks for the NCAA tournament, where to attack, what different little futures I like. But I hope you guys enjoyed the bracket breakdown and you're able to build your brackets and use this for some good information. If you have not already, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Helps me out a lot. I'm trying to put out a lot of content to help people learn the game of basketball and find ways to improve their betting. And I thought this NCAA tournament breakdown would be a very helpful guide for some people. So thanks, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed, and have a great time watching the NCAA tournament. It's the best 4 days of the year in the first and second round. All right, later.